unity and interconnectedness of the universe is understood, and we know the planet Earth is also interconnected. But although we know this on an intellectual level, it's not yet become part of universal consciousness. During the last century, from an obscure movement that originated in the Middle East, dedicated to that goal, the Baha'is has grown to an organization second in size only to the Catholic Church. They challenge prevailing theories about human nature and teach that love, not war, is to be truly human. Food for Thought Productions is pleased to present 3 representatives of the Baha'is to tell us more about their organization: Michael Heisler, Cynthia Hall, and Charles Hall. Here they are with our producer, Lee Baker.
Well, it's wonderful having you all here. And it's been so interesting from the time that I heard you, Mike, talk about the Baha'is. I never knew very much about it, and got kind of interested from your speech. And then, of course, Charles, you brought over an awful lot of information. Now I feel like a fountain of knowledge.
Baha'u'llah publicly declared his mission in 1863, and he was in Baghdad at the time. He had been exiled there by the Persian government.
That's now Iran.
That would be present-day Iran, yes. Baha'u'llah was born in Iran, or Persia at the time. He was from Tehran, and he was born a prince, actually. His father worked in the court of the Shah. When he became a Babi, or a follower of the Babs, he did face some persecution, and the persecution intensified as the faith of the Bab grew, and eventually in 1852 he was banished to Baghdad, and it was in 1863 that he declared there.
So that was, I understand that was where the magical symbol 9 came from. It was 9 years later that he decided to expand on that.
Actually, 9's important to us in a number of ways, but yeah, 9 is, for Baha'is, 9 is the number of unity. Mm-hmm. And I think we could just, for that, we could leave it at that.
Yes. The highest one digit, highest
right.
Single digit, right.
Yes.
And then I noticed in some of the information that you had brought to me that the temples all have a certain basic expectation that they have a dome and 9 entrances.
Correct, yes.
Right, yes.
And then they're also tailored, though, to fit the environment of the country in which they're being built. And so each one has a very distinct and unique character based on the country.
So that they match the environment.
Right.
Yes.
Right, right. And you're in how many countries are there? Groups.
How many countries is the Baha'i Faith in now?
Yes.
Well, the Baha'i Faith is the second most widespread religion in the world after Christianity in terms of the number of different places you find Baha'is, the number of different ethnic and cultural groups represented within the faith.
Yeah, and I think it's right now about 225 countries and territories where the Baha'is reside.
I see. And I was struck with all of the social services that you provide.
Yes, Baha'is are involved in social and economic development projects all over the planet, and you read about some of those in the book. One that I enjoy mentioning is the school that in Chile. I've got a friend named Kenton who's up there, and in Chile he teaches English at a university there, and there's a school up the hill for the Mapuche Indians. And one of the fascinating things to me about this is that the school teaches in the native language of the locals there, the Mapuche language. And given the characteristics and background of the other schools before that only taught Spanish and were actively attempting to suppress Mapuche culture, especially the older Indians there were very heartened to have their children coming back from the school and speaking the language of their forebears.
Their forebears. Now, Baha'i came from Islam.
That's right.
It was prior. The religion prior was Islam. So when the Baha'i group started, they had quite a bit of difficulty, I understand.
Well, and still have quite a bit of difficulty today as it relates to being persecuted by the government is over there. And in fact, the United States government and in fact the United Nations has on many occasions come out in recognition of just exactly what is going on to the Baha'is and the fact that they are, as I say, currently being executed today.
As long as
a strong belief there that everyone really is equal and should be treated with respect, and that really would be the ultimate purpose of this religion in bringing all of the world together.
Right. One
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
One community.
Right.
One community. And I understand you have an affiliation with United Nations, is that right?
Well, I think it's called an advisory position with the United Nations, so that we're not really a part of it, but other than in that respect. So
I see.
any issues that may come up that social issues or something along those lines that where they're looking for, just ideas as to how to address these, we are there for, as
In
an
other words,
advisory
you
capacity.
make very pertinent suggestions to
Yes.
them.
Well, we certainly try to, yeah. Yeah, the Baha'is have what's called NGO status at the UN, or non-governmental organization.
Right. What attracted me to one of the principles is the equality of the sexes, which was one of the basic things that is a part of
Right.
Baha'i
And I think
philosophy.
when you look at it today, most people might say, oh, we believe in that. But if you think about when this was first announced, it really was revolutionary. The concept that men and women are equal in the sight of God and equal on
Should
this,
be
on
equal,
this,
should
on
be
this
equal
earth.
to everybody.
Right, right.
Right, exactly. That was so 150 years ago.
Right,
We're still working on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have
I
a
think
long
we're
way to go.
still working on it today. So.
Right, that's right. But I like the way that your organization has the training for economic independence for women, and we have a photograph of women at the sewing machines.
Oh, great, yeah.
Learning how to make a living for themselves and become independent, and farming, and the various skills to be supporting, to be supporting and contributing. What was interesting to me is when I was going through some of this material that you brought me, and the programs that the Baha'i sponsor all around the world were very similar to what the Atheist Center in India does there, because they had we went around and we visited where they even built a lake and taught fishing. And they were teaching sewing, and the women who were taking the course in sewing who completed it were given a sewing machine.
Yeah.
So that they could support themselves and so forth. And they were into education. So this idea of just humanity helping humanity is very similar, and I think a lot of the NGOs do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, because it's fundamental to actually changing society and bringing about any kind of continued growth. Because if you're just providing, let's say, some material means to people, that will only last for a limited time. But if you really teach people how to do things for themselves, that's going to last forever.
You were going to tell us a little bit about the values as far as family values that which consider the ideals as far as.
Yeah, because when we think about building a sense of community and building a big global society too, it really starts at the individual level and then the family unit, because that really is the core foundation for building outwards and joining more like
concentric circles,
if you will.
Okay.
Thank you. But so the family unit is extremely important. And if you take the equality of women and men, that needs to be applied within a family situation. And so that there's respect for everyone in the family. There's a lot of consultation in terms of people getting to discuss what
what they want to accomplish.
what they want to do, how they want to do that. So it's not necessarily set in some rigid way.
I see.
But yet there are some very strong guidelines for keeping that family unit safe and protected in terms of just some of the moral and ethical values
Principles.
there. Yeah.
Like, for instance.
Chastity, definitely keeping, I mean, and it may sound old-fashioned today, but staying very true to your partner, and that, and also just keeping the whole idea of sex within a married situation. And for a lot of people today,
You don't go around and check, though.
no, we don't. No, we don't go and say, okay, now what are you doing here? But, you know, hopefully no one's out there just so flagrantly doing their own thing either.
What you do is forcefully suggest that sometimes you have different combinations in families, right? What do you consider a family?
I'm going to let Mike.
Gee, thanks.
You know about the old structure. Okay, Mike.
You know, it's really interesting about society today, because especially in Western countries such as the United States, how the pendulum has swung, and I think that what's important to emphasize from the standpoint of the Baha'i Faith is that we do respect the rights of everyone, and you know, and just because, you know, I mean, basically as Baha'is, what we believe is that it's like what Cynthia said about about marriage being a union between a man and a woman, and that the sexual impulse is best expressed in the context of that union. And chastity is, we talk about chastity in terms of sex, but chastity also means purity of thought and purity of action, and working towards that goal. And it's also understanding that what Baha'u'llah teaches is that Baha'i laws are for our benefit, that it will be helpful to us to obey them.
Well, but there are other family structures now.
Sure. I mean,
And I think
people are free to live as they will.
A definition that's sometimes given now is a family is any group of people who work together, share a life, share goals, and help each other and love each other, and that makes a family. But we have really a responsibility to take care of the planet.
Definitely.
Yes, and that actually is one of the teachings of the Baha'i Faith, that this is something that we are the stewards over, the guardians of. Absolutely, yes, and we have a responsibility to the environment. We have a responsibility to take care of this planet, and I want to point out that as Baha'is, we also have, and especially given what the current circumstances are, we have an assurance from the founder of the faith that these ruinous wars shall pass away and the most great peace shall come. And the most great peace is an organic unity of humanity where we're not simply talking about it all the time and trying to keep it at the forefront of our thoughts, but that it is such a basic underlying assumption that no one even questions it, that no one even goes, well, how could we not be? And for us, it's not a matter of hope. It's a matter of knowing that this will happen. And what we hope and pray for in the meantime is that the suffering that humanity goes through on the path towards this unity be minimized.
Well, I'm not for a lot of suffering. I'd rather just be an activist and, be really educating and working towards peace and being very pragmatic.
Yes.
I mean, what do we gain by war? We lose an awful lot, besides all the lives that are lost or mangled. Look at what we lose by having money that goes into war material that could be used for education. And social purposes and making life livable for more people.
Yeah.
So
I'll take that a step further. I mean, having served in the Air Force in public relations and having been stationed at an air base that was a major development center for weapon systems, I can tell you that there's a lot of brain power that is diverted towards making war that would be that I would love to see diverted towards doing things to help out our fellow human beings.
Improve life.
Right.
Yeah.
Improve life.
But I'd also add that Baha'is are totally in favor of peace, but we also recognize that in the long run, that for a lasting peace to happen, that there has to be respect for human rights, there has to be an organic sense of justice, because a lasting peace won't happen without justice.
Right. We'll have a whole program for you. In the meantime. In the meantime.
For now, then.
What I was very pleased to see as a part of the education, I think that the education idea is very comprehensive, covering the whole person, and the arts are included. And we have a picture that was done by a 10-year-old boy that's just quite amazing.
Yeah, because the arts are a way really of touching the heart and really releasing some of that creative energy and really helping to come up with some of the solutions that are needed today, just in terms of giving another way of focusing on it.
Absolutely, because you have the intellectual and then you have the emotional.
Yeah.
And the arts can reach the emotional, and people act from emotional reasons more than intellectual, I think.
Yeah, well, I think a lot too today has to deal with the fact that there is not done as much as used to be done, that allowance of that expression through the arts. And I think once that we recognize that and start bringing it more into play.
Absolutely.
Here in the local area where they started to cut back so tremendously in part of the arts programs. And now what you're seeing is individual groups and organizations that are trying to take that on and to supplement what we're not getting in the school. And it's very important that these that the children nowadays, and the adults for that matter, have an idea or have a vehicle that they can go ahead and express themselves in.
Well, not everybody has the same kind of intelligence.
Right. Yeah.
And not everybody has facility in expressing themselves, their ideas, in just a verbal way.
Yeah.
Not speaking about you.
Okay. No,
You're in good shape. But a lot of people, a lot of children especially, they are not necessarily verbal, but they can draw and they can act. And then there's another picture we haven't put up on the screen of a theater group.
Oh yeah.
And I think teaching with theater is the greatest.
Yes.
It's absolutely. And in fact, that was the earliest education system, was telling stories and acting them out. That was before reading and writing, before.
Yeah, and that allows, a few weeks ago there was a program at the Baha'i Center in Los Angeles of a puppet show. And someone was talking about the unity of humankind, and they were relating it through puppets, and just seeing the different skits with that. It helps bring a message that sometimes otherwise people might not be able to hear. And then when you get the children involved themselves in doing skits or doing some of these shows themselves, that helps the message really sink in.
Absolutely.
When you have to role play it and try it out. So.
Absolutely. I have a series called Storytelling Plus, which is the idea of using the classic children folk literature, folk tales, fairy tales, and so on. And the idea is to take a story and then think about it and talk about it and then draw pictures and act it out and all of these things. Because what I was saying about everyone isn't facile at expressing themselves in only one way. Receiving information, people take it in different ways. So they take it in with the arts and with theater and so forth. Much more, it's more real to them, more becomes internalized.
Right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, just looking at those multiple levels of learning. I mean, that's so critical in any educational environment to be able to present that in those different ways. The Baha'is are currently doing a series of study circles around some course material looking at the spiritual nature of humankind and just examining what's our role here on earth and what should we be doing. And when we can take some of that material, not just reading it, but also having a way of relating to it in an artful fashion, that's been very helpful in getting people to really have that aha
internalize
moment
it.
there.
Okay, and also not just reading it, but then talking about the ideas, and then, you know, seeing how does this relate to my life, and how does this idea helpful
Right.
to make my life more satisfactory. And so I think what you were saying about, you know, these concentric circles, so it starts with the family, and then it's the community, and then the nation, and the world, and so forth. It starts with the individual,
Yes.
and then
Right.
the family, and the more the person becomes involved with the wider circles, the richer the individual becomes.
Absolutely.
So, what was the other thing I was going to ask you about? Because we have a picture of one of the temples, and showing what the guidelines are with the dome reaching for the heights, and the 7 entrances. Besides the symbolism, it occurred to me that the 9 entrances that might mean everybody is welcome.
Yes, absolutely.
And important that's an important message, because all religions are welcome within the temples, and writings from them will be read from there. I mean,
And we were talking about everybody, believers and non-believers.
Wow.
That's
As long as
definitely true.
people, I think the key thing is whether a person is an ethical person who is sharing responsibility for the world and the rest of humanity and the earth and so forth. I think those are the benchmarks. That's the new terminology we were hearing, benchmark. But I remember when I was a child, my father saying, it doesn't matter, you know, where a person is coming from if they're a good person.
Right.
So however they got there, they're a good person.
Yeah.
That's what counts.
And when you look at that goodness, if you consider that, you know, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. And so what are we doing? I mean, and how are we living our lives? And how are we trying to bring about that betterment of the world? And these are the things that we'd want to share in common with people, is that we all are trying every day to make the world a better place. I mean, and in all our interactions with people.
So when you're doing that for others, you know, you are growing yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's how your organization has grown, by going all around the world and trying to lift up people who need to have a hand once in a while. So one of the things at the meeting last night, they talked about, one of the principles was that nobody should be too wealthy or too poor. Everybody should be somewhat comfortable.
Yeah, trying to avoid those extremes.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And that, because we really are all responsible for each other, and so it's not to our advantage to have so much wealth and then see other people suffering, or to find ways to entertain ourselves so that we don't even have to look and notice that the people are suffering. But ultimately, we're all being impacted by that, because we're all parts of one human body. And so it's almost like ignoring your little toe. And you might think, oh, well, I don't need it. But every bit of the
When
human
it
body.
hurts, you're very worried.
That's right. And so it's for our own good that we need to be concerned about everybody. You know, yeah.
Okay. The other thing, I wasn't aware of the fact that you have this center in Israel, where you keep all the original writings. Is that?
Yeah, we have the archives there.
archives.
Along with, there's several other buildings there in Haifa, Israel. There's beautiful gardens. A lot of people have been to Haifa to visit the gardens. They're very tranquil, very absolutely gorgeous environment, and it's open to anyone who would like to come there. It became so popular that the government there has to issue tickets for people to actually have the chance to go.
Have a turn.
It's absolutely no cost,
I see.
but just to be able to have, so there wouldn't be long lines waiting by the gate, they issue the tickets.
I
but
see.
it's
I see.
absolutely beautiful.
There are a couple of things I'd like to point out about that, why the World Center is in Haifa, Israel. Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, was taken as a prisoner there by the Ottoman Empire, and he was actually taken to the prison city of Akka, and then it was basically across the bay from Akka, which is where Haifa is, and that's where Baha'u'llah said that the World Center is to be, and that's where it is today. So.
Mm-hmm. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, that was basically, very briefly
I was
how it
wondering.
happened.
I was
yes.
wondering why you happened to pick that. What happened to be there?
I would also point out that of the various major faiths in Israel that have holy places there, the Baha'i Faith is the one faith of them that does not take money from the Israeli government for the maintenance of Baha'i shrines. Mm-hmm. Basically, what happens is Baha'is all over the world donate, and that's where the money comes from. Yes,
They
I'd also
maintain it in
add
style.
that only Baha'is can give to Baha'i funds, so that's not being maintained. So that World Center is not being maintained by just anyone who wants to give money. Basically, that's only being maintained by Baha'is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
and you had mentioned the archives building there, which actually houses the originals of the writings.
Of the founder.
Right,
I see.
and some of his clothing and things like that. It's all very well preserved there.
Oh, I
And
see.
Baha'is can go there and visit on a pilgrimage. They can apply for a pilgrimage and go.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could talk a lot longer, but we've run out of time. So listen, I want to thank you all for
Well,
coming.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
We hope you have found this program intellectually stimulating and that you will continue to investigate the ideas raised here. To connect with other like-minded individuals, please contact any of the dozens of free thought organizations, such as the American Humanist Association, American Atheists, the Center for Inquiry, and Atheists United. You may also email the producer directly via leebaker27@gmail.com. This program has been distributed through the courtesy of Atheists United.